Alright, welcome to episode 3 of the Swordfighting Bible. In the last episode, we briefly went over the 4 big concepts, and today we're going to go over 2 of them in detail. We're going to talk about speed and board control. So pull out the big brains for this one, because we're going to go over the more advanced stuff. Alright, let's start. In the last episode, we went over the straight lining exercise, and today I want to show just how important speed is. What you're about to see is a dual screen from my channel where we both send pretty much the same opener. Okay, now let's rewatch that in slow motion and see just how many frames we both wasted. As you can see, these things really add up. If I was just a few frames faster with my opener, I could have sent mine 1 turn earlier than my opponent and therefore have put myself in a very advantageous position. It was at this second where I sent my opener. If I didn't waste 3 to 5 of those frames, my opener would have been sent 1 turn earlier, which would have crushed my opponent's build. Hopefully that gave you an appreciation of how much speed matters. Even between 2 sword fighters at the top level, 1 frame can cost you the game. Today we're looking to go even faster, and we are going to look at one technique which will allow you to gain a small amount of frames. What you do is that you double flip a piece. If you notice, the focused piece in each double piece you receive stays stationary. So just flipping twice essentially extends your reach and allows you to reach the bottom a few frames faster. Just look at the following clip. The moral of the story is, you gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast. Gotta go fast, too fast, too fast, too fast, too fast. Alright, next up we got board control. And we're going to dive deeper into how different swords affect our board and some strategies to deal with them effectively. We're going to look at the scimitar, skulldagger, saber, and the falchion. Let's start with the scimitar. You might find it difficult to build blocks against this sword. If so, then it's a good idea to try and place your green in the second column and yellow in the fifth column. Let's look at some of the sword's attacks. This is a 2x10 strike, and we can clearly see how the red splits the green. Keeping in mind that each fourth piece in the third column is a red will benefit you when trying to clean up the board. Next, we see a 2x6, 2x8, and a 2-layer sprinkle. Again, keeping the third column clean still is very important, and that red in the middle needs to go so you can start stacking the green. One important aspect here is not clearing things without a strategy, and I think this is the part where a lot of people mess up. If you were to clear the red in column 5, you will completely screw over the board on the right side because everything is now uneven. Just look at how it would look like if you placed a red breaker and a yellow piece down the middle. Now, I'm not saying that was the incorrect play. I'm just pointing out that until you clear the yellow in the center, you should work on other parts of your board until the right side is even again and it's easier to manage. Okay, back to the 2x10. Notice that even though this isn't that complex of a board to clear, it's hard to build off of because of the inherent danger of knowing that a tall sprinkle in column 4 can block you out from the center because of the potential yellow that can clog up and block you from clearing the reds in column 3. Once again, collecting pieces in big groups and keeping your board even is crucial. Managing the red and collecting the green from the third column together with the green from column 1 and 2 is how you keep your sides clean. The scimitar player wants to make your job in killing him as hard as possible, So if you're using a falchion, you need to take extra care to not feed the enemy too many sprinkles. For example, if you get hit by something like this, just sprinkles, yes, but as a falchion, you don't have many options to retaliate and you lose in this kind of sprinkling exchange. The focus of attack as a falchion user in this case is building off of the blue and forming a combo big enough to make the Scimitar player lose steam. Don't be afraid to combo sprinkles if necessary to just fill their board up. Even though the falchion sprinkles are the weakest of the four swords, if a Scimitar player loses in tempo, it can be hard to recover, while the opposite is not true. So the strategy as a Scimitar user is to drag games out. Your attacks aren't as deadly as the other three swords, but you benefit from these kind of exchanges, and if you gain enough momentum due to your enemy not knowing how to build against you, you'll come out ahead. They'll slowly butcher their sides and third column, and they'll end up killing themselves. Alright, next up is the Skull Dagger, known for its sprinkles. You're going to see that in general, each sword has a certain style you need to adopt in order to counter it effectively. This always involves keeping your board even in some sense. This applies even more so to the Skull Dagger than against the Scimitar, as we'll see in a second. First, let's talk about its weaknesses and strengths. This sword has very subpar big strikes, but has strong sprinkles. Sadly, just sending sprinkles will not cut it because all sprinkles are halved, so if you want to put pressure on your opponent, you will at some point have to involve strikes in your attacks. So how do we find the right balance? Well, the following is a 2x6. Not very impressive, but what happens if we include a 4-layer sprinkle? Now suddenly we have something going on. Similar to the Scimitar, the point of attack lies in the sides, and even more so if you're a falchion user, you will need to use the blue effectively to put pressure on the Skull Dagger. In general, as a Skull Dagger user, you want for your attacks to land on the sides in order to split the sides and then take advantage of your sprinkles in order to suffocate your opponent. Just like in the last example, we saw that the blue formed a block for your opponent, which we want to avoid that. In general, try to focus mostly on sprinkles, but if you get some easy 2x4s or 2x6s, by all means send them, just don't go overboard. Mixed attacks that include sprinkles and small to medium sized strikes are preferable. The Skull Dagger has a favorable matchup against the Scimitar because of how easy it is to send sprinkles. You just need to abuse the 2-layer sprinkle, split the center, and try to avoid sending sprinkles that are 1 layer or smaller. Playing against a saber isn't that easy, but it is still doable. You want to avoid forming too many blocks and side swords in this matchup to try to take advantage of the big sprinkles you can send and cripple the saber player. In general, when playing against the Skull Dagger, you need to be conscious about keeping an even board. On their own, the sprinkles are annoying at most, but with an uneven board, they provide a real challenge. Just look at the following board that's about to get hit by sprinkles. Now you're in big trouble. Okay, now on to the most controversial sword in the history of sword fighting, the saber, considered by some to be a brain-dead, no-skill sword, and by others an RNG coin flip sword. Either way, we're going to cover the non-reversed version of the sword because it's the most powerful one, which we'll explain why in a second. This sword is the most interesting out of the four because it requires a very specific playstyle in order to be effective. Its biggest strength lies in its 2x8 being very crippling, especially if it lands in uneven grounds. Look at the following. Looks pretty messy, right? Now watch as we add a 2-layer sprinkle. This is the ideal opener for a saber user. This is what makes the sword so interesting because it forces you to send a specific size of attacks, while other swords you can just send huge strikes or huge sprinkles without caring for the size too much. This sword is easily comparable to the Skull Dagger, but in reverse in terms of strikes. You want your strikes to land in the second and third columns, otherwise the playstyle is very similar to that of a Skull Dagger, but allows for more strikes to be sent. In order to counter the sword effectively, you need to pay attention to the evenness of your board. Compare these two boards hit by a sprinkle.
Now notice two things. One, similarly to that of a school dagger, keeping your board even matters a lot. And two, if you keep your board even, you only need 2 breakers to clear the whole attack. The first thing that comes to mind is that this sword sucks. Why would you sprinkle with it, right? The thing is, if you don't get a blue breaker, you just straight up die if you get more attacks, right? And the other thing that makes it so much harder to build with other colors, such as yellow or green in this case. This fact makes the saber somewhat frustrating to play against, and if you lose because you didn't get any blue, for example, then the game might feel very unfair in that sense. Which is why people may complain about RNG when it comes to the saber. But alright, and lastly, why is the non-reversed saber stronger? Because of the nature of sprinkles, it makes it harder to connect the major color as you can see in the picture. This makes it even harder if you need 2 blue breakers when you split the 2 major colors, like the blue in this example, which make the reversed version quite a bit weaker.
And last but definitely not least is the falchion. Without a doubt the most popular sword in the game, and for a good reason. We're going to, similarly to the saber, look at the stronger version of the falchion, which in this case is the reversed falchion. We will see in a second why this is the case. It's easy to see that this sword has very weak sprinkles, but has very strong strikes. Even small strikes are effective with this sword. But the reason why this is considered the best sword in the game is not because of its strikes, it's because of its sprinkles. Weird, right? How can this be? Consider the column 4 sprinkle. If column 3 is blocked off, you can take full advantage of the alternating sprinkle pattern that occurs in column 4. Let's look at a regular opener with a 2x6 and a 2x8. Now watch as we add some sprinkles to it. This alternating sprinkle that completely destroys your center is what makes this sword so strong. This sword naturally rewards sending strikes and rewards you for sending sprinkles as well to clog up the middle. Managing the center and keeping column 3 accessible to clear this alternating sprinkle is what makes you win or lose games, because once you lose access to the center, you need to get a lot of lucky breakers in order to recover. The non-reversed version is actually a very fair sword and has more counterplay, because sprinkling with it punishes the falchion user a lot more, which is only fair in my opinion because it has pretty strong strikes. All in all, if it weren't for the reversed falchion, I think we'd see a more varied meta game where other swords could shine. Alright, this was a long one, but we've covered everything necessary to correctly handle the board control aspect of the 4 most popular swords. I hope you learned something and look forward to episode 4, where we're going to look at combos and the macro in more depth. Until then, have a good one.